Welcome back to our podcast, Grief and Life as We Know It. If you've been following along, you know we've been diving deep into grief and into my story. We've been talking about how it hits, how it changes you, and how you somehow keep moving forward. And today we want to talk about the very beginning, those first weeks, first months, when everything felt impossible, when the world keeps spinning but yours has come to a full stop.
Hey everyone, Nina, this is a big one. Those early days, I think this can be very important to share because this can be so helpful to other people in grief, but it might feel like a blur now.
Yeah, in a way it's a blur, but at the same time, I remember everything so clearly. It's like my body stored every detail and every emotion, kind of.
Can you fill us in with what first comes to mind?
I guess maybe the fact that I had this scream after my husband passed away. I actually don't remember it, but I was told after.
Do you want to share the story with us about that scream?
Yeah. So right after he died, when it was just me and him in the living room, I wanted to be completely alone with him and make him ready for his next journey, as weird as it sounds. You know, cleaning the body and getting him dressed and so on. It was important for me that I was the one doing all of this. It felt like the last thing I could do for him, and it felt close and also peaceful in a strange way, even though it was absolutely heartbreaking at the same time. And everyone there remember me screaming. They heard me all the way upstairs. You know, this primal scream, I guess. I don't remember it, like I said, not at all. But I do still remember the feeling, you know, all the emotions. It's hard to explain.
Wow, I get chills from hearing you say that. It's like your body remembers what your mind tried to protect you from. And that scream, you not remembering it, it just shows how deep the shock runs. And that moment of being alone with him, you know, you and him laying there, I can't even imagine it.
No, that's okay. You don't have to.
I think a lot of people don't realize how physical grief can be, how it takes over your whole system, not just your thoughts.
Yeah, but it really does. And I also remember waking up every morning after he died, and for a split second, everything was normal. And then it hit me over and over again, the reality of it, the finality.
Yeah, I can only imagine. A nightmare for sure, and then to realize it is actually reality. So brutal that must have felt, like a new shock every morning. What kept you going?
Honestly, first of all, my sister-in-law, who just had this presence of safety, she held me up without knowing at the time, despite her own grief, and also the rest of our family and friends. I mean, just the presence of love, I guess, is the answer here.
Good. And that is so comforting to hear, that you had that around you. Because it was hard for me not to be able to be there for you. But that is a different story.
Yeah, you had your reasons, sister, and we are lucky to be a big family, so.
Yeah.
But after that, after a few weeks, I was able to make a promise to myself, and that was that I will live a happy life despite everything. And I told myself this every single day because I just had to. And this wasn't just for me, but of course also for my boys and for all of you around me. I just couldn't break.
Yeah.
And my husband and I also talked about this, as I mentioned before. He made me promise him so much. And one of the things was that I wouldn't let grief swallow me whole, that I wouldn't let life slip away just because his had. And I remember he said to me, "You can do this, Nina. You're going to be fine."
That is such a powerful promise. And also so big-hearted and generous of him to tell you this so that you had that with you. kind of like you were doing this for him. But I know that's easier said than done.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was so strong and generous, and till this day I'm so stunned over his strength, really. We had 6 years living with this, so then you are kind of forced to have these conversations of life and death. At least we did, and that's all thanks to him, because it was so important for him to know that we would be all right after.
Yeah, but still, so hard that must have been.
Yeah, when I think about it now, I just admire that he was able to do so. But to be honest, there were days I felt like I had to live for him too, as if I had to carry both of us in a way, kind of desperate. And that was hard. I was barely holding myself together some days, and other days I could function better and be stronger. It's kind of this, I don't know, ambivalence, in all of these emotions you have in the beginning. Hard to explain again.
Ambivalence. That is actually a good way to describe it. I mean, all these emotions. How did you cope?
I think the fact that I allowed myself to grieve my way. I didn't force myself to be strong all the time, but I felt everything. I wanted to feel every emotion, like raw and unfiltered, exactly as it came. And that was a good thing for me. And now I feel like this was my, I don't know, superpower at the time.
Definitely a superpower. That really does take courage or strength. I can imagine a lot of people try to control their grief or push it away. Keep it in, you might say.
Yeah, but grief doesn't work like that. Not for me, at least. I guess this is handled differently because we are all so different, and some people just try to force it away, maybe, and I understand that totally because grief is so painful, so that makes sense. But my experience is that you have to let it move through you, because at some point you have to work through it.
Right. Yeah.
So in the beginning, your mind goes to all the places. I had thoughts I didn't even want to admit to myself. Guilt, anger, fear, even relief at times. Relief because now I knew he wasn't suffering anymore. And with that feeling comes also shame. You start questioning yourself. Am I a terrible person for feeling this? But I realize those thoughts don't define me. They're just a part of processing everything, I guess.
You're definitely not a bad person, girl. I can understand you had those feelings, and that is such an important thing to point out. Grieving is really hard work, and I can imagine some specific feelings may leave some people feeling ashamed of their thoughts, like you said, but that's probably normal.
Yeah, I guess that's normal. I'm normal. But as you say, it's hard work for sure. I did also realize during this time that I needed to be completely alone in my darkest hours. I had to sit with my grief and feel it fully, not with people around me that I loved, but 100% alone. And this need came out of the blue. I wasn't prepared to feel this way. And some days I would just lay down on the floor where he died. There had been a temporary bed set up in our living room. One for him and one for me, as I needed to be close to him at all times. And after he was gone, I would just lie there on the floor for hours sometimes, just crying and letting it all out. And I needed to do that alone, not because others wouldn't have held space for me, but because it was mine. That pain was mine.
Wow. Poor you. It's so hard to hear you say this, but I can also understand why you would do this. To lay on the floor where he had been and to kind of hold on still, but at the same time, just get it all out, get the feelings out.
But I also had this fear of sinking too deep, of getting stuck. So I made myself get up every single day. I forced myself to take a shower and put on my face and step outside, because I knew if I let myself stay in bed or on the floor, I might never get out. And something as simple as I mean, fresh air, the sound of birds, it really helped, and it reminded me that life was still happening around me. I could never have managed this alone, though. I keep repeating this, but no one can, I think. And I'm forever grateful for you and my beautiful friends and family for supporting me in all this.
That's what family and friends are for, my dear. But I'm also so thankful to hear this, that you found that strength and actually did that. Got up every day despite it all, because it probably would have been easy to just lay in a dark room with your sorrow. But of course, like you said, family and friends are so important in a matter. What would we do without them?
I have no idea. And I hope from the bottom of my heart that our listeners has their support in family and friends also, because we need that.
You mentioned last time how differently people might experience grief, and that for you it came with some anger and fear, at least in the beginning. But then I remember you telling me about how this book helped you, and it's a book that your best friend recommended called A Grief Observed by C.S. Lewis, written by a husband who lost his wife to cancer. What struck you the most about this book?
One thing that really hit me was how raw and unfiltered his grief was. He wasn't trying to package it neatly. He described the fear that comes with loss, not just fear of being alone, but fear of who you become after losing someone, because it affects your whole identity.
That makes sense. Grief changes you, and I guess that can be terrifying. Did you recognize yourself in his words?
In some ways, yeah. He talks about how grief feels like fear, not just sadness, but a real physical unease. And I remember that feeling, like the ground had been pulled out from underneath me. But I also remember realizing that the fear wasn't just about missing my husband, but it was about not knowing who I was without him.
That makes sense. I guess after being together for so long, you become us in a way, and now it was back to being just you. But with him, though, just in a different way.
Yeah, of course. He will always be with me.
I also think a lot of people expect grief to just be sorrow, but fear is such a big part of it too. Fear of moving on, fear of forgetting, fear of not grieving correctly, you can say.
Yeah, fear. But I think what Lewis shows so beautifully is that grief is a process of becoming. You don't just lose someone, you also lose a version of yourself, and eventually you have to meet the person you become on the other side of it.
I never thought of grief this way. That is such a nice way of saying it, and also such a beautiful and important reminder for all of us.
Indeed, it is. And it resonated with me deeply because I had never read or heard it expressed that way before.
I love that these books exist, and the fact that hearing or reading this can be so healing, because you might feel more normal knowing that someone else feels the exact same way as you do or did at the time.
Yeah, that's so true. And I also remember now that I had this urge to tell my husband about everything for months after he died, actually, because that was the normal thing for us to do. So I felt like I wanted to call him and reflect over the day or of things that had happened when we weren't together, and that kind of stuck with me for a long time.
For sure. Yeah, you just lost the one person that you told everything to. So that totally makes sense.
And that was also a constant reminder, because for a split second I forgot that he wasn't there anymore. So that thing about becoming, as he described in his book, I mean, it's a process for sure.
I also remember you told me that you were charging his phone for months after.
Yeah, that was also a thing. I just couldn't let it die out. I don't know, it's kind of strange, but that was so important for me in the beginning.
I get that. And then you were also experiencing insomnia during that time, not being able to sleep at night. I think that also is quite a common thing.
Yeah, I think that's quite common, as you say. And that was awful, or it is awful. I still struggle with this. But back then, nights were the hardest. I could go all day keeping myself busy in a way, but when it got quiet, the thoughts came out and the weight of it all came crashing down, and I barely slept.
So exhausting that must have been. Sleep is so important.
It really is. But I think this all is a part of the process. Of course, I slept eventually, and I also took naps during the day to cope. But I didn't want to take anything for it, though, for the insomnia. No sleeping pills or alcohol to numb it. My doctor, of course, suggested this. I mean, not alcohol, but sleeping pills, just to make it easier to sleep. But I wanted to feel my grief, not postpone it. And I don't know why I felt so strongly about this, but that was the right thing for me to do. This was an active choice I made with myself, and it was painful, but I think it helped me to heal faster in a way. And for me, at least, this was the best way of coping. But of course, I totally understand the need for numbing. And it's not a bad idea to take sleeping pills from time to time to sleep and try to recover. But again, this is my story and my coping mechanism.
I really admire that, Nina, truly, because I can only imagine how tempting it must have been to just shut it all out, to find something, anything to take the edge off. But you didn't. You let yourself feel every bit of it, even when it was unbearable. And that takes so much strength. And I get what you mean. Grief isn't something that you can just put on pause. It doesn't wait for you to be ready. Maybe that's why facing it head on, as hard as it was, helped you move through it instead of getting stuck in it. But still, those nights, I can't even imagine laying there with all that silence, nothing to distract you, just you and your thoughts, and must have felt endless.
Yeah, but as I said, this was my way of coping, and this isn't the right way or the best for everyone, maybe. And I would never judge anyone for taking sleeping pills or trying to numb the pain away. But the best thing for me was not to. And also, I don't think that I'm some kind of superwoman because of this. You just kind of go with the flow, and this was my path.
I totally get that. And your boys, they must have been a huge part of what kept you going as well.
100%. They were my reason to get up in the morning. But at the same time, I didn't want to depend only on them. In the beginning, I leaned on them a lot, maybe too much. They even slept in my room for weeks and took turns to take care of me. But I realized I couldn't let them carry my grief too. They were grieving their own loss, and I wanted us to be there for each other, but not to the point where we couldn't stand on our own. And that is important to me, and also that they are independent and strong men that can make their free choices in life, not worrying about their mama on top of that.
That's a tough balance. You need to be taken care of, and you wanted to take care of them too. But I think you did an incredible job. Such independent, strong, and caring boys you have. I love them.
Yeah, they really are. Thank you. I love them too. And now I remember one of my hardest moments at the time. When I physically couldn't walk one day, my body just shut down, and this was, I think, the day before the funeral. And I actually crawled on the floor at one point, and my whole body and soul was aching so much. And my youngest son looked at me and said, "Mom, can we please go for a walk in the forest? You need to get out of this." And that moment changed something in me. I had to find a way to move forward. And this was kind of a turning point for me. I started to shift my brain, and I made this promise to myself every day after.
Wow. Grief really has a physical impact. I feel so bad hearing this, crawling on the floor. But also so lucky you were to have him there to pick you up and to suggest such an important thing in the moment that really did change something in you.
I wasn't prepared for it to have such a dramatic impact either, but it truly did.
You're a nurse and had a great job. And a thing I think would be really challenging after experiencing loss like this is to have to go back to your regular work life after. I know being around sick people so soon after your husband passed was something that you couldn't do.
For me, leaving work at the time was important, and thankfully here in Norway there is room for that. Because I needed to take a step back and just heal. It was all too much too soon, and I just couldn't go back to nursing as a profession. And we are lucky to have a welfare system that supports everyone, and as a widow, I'm so grateful for that. I pay my taxes with pleasure, knowing it's there when people need it.
Oh yeah, that's something that I really appreciate about Norway too. The fact that when you're hit with something like this, you don't have to worry about finances on top of everything else. And it's the same with medical care. When someone is sick with cancer or anything, really, all the treatments and medications are covered. It allows people to focus on what truly matters, taking care of yourself, and also gives you time to heal after trauma.
Exactly. And beyond the system, I must say again, my family, our family, and my friends were everything. My closest friends who just showed up and sat with me and listened and let me repeat myself over and over again. I mean, that kind of presence, it was healing in a way I can't even describe. They were there for me through all of this. And also, I must say, our mom and stepdad and my in-laws, they were present the whole time, during thick and thin, and helped us and me with everything. And I'm forever grateful, and I love them so much. But also, to be honest, at the same time, back then, being surrounded by them, by all these couples still together, still whole, older than us, all these thoughts that goes through your mind, it was so painful. I had never felt that kind of loneliness before, and I also felt so shameful about even thinking this way. It wasn't their fault. And there was this lingering bitterness within me. Why did my husband have to die so young? Why us? And, so many questions and none of them with answers.
I totally understand that. And I think that is quite normal thoughts and feelings to have.
Yeah, I guess so. But I refuse to let that bitterness take over, because bitterness doesn't just hurt me, it spreads, and I didn't want to be that person. So every single day I made a choice of that also, and I truly believe in that power. I'm not a bitter widow because I choose not to be. I refuse to be.
That shows how strong you are. I truly believe that we have more control over our mindset than we think. It's not easy, but we can choose how we respond to life's hardest moments.
Yeah, and I refuse to feel sorry for myself of being a victim. No way. Of course, there were days when I did and still do, to be honest, feel sorry for myself, and that's human. But overall, I made a choice, and this might sound so easy, and it isn't. It's hard work, but I really believe in this power.
You have all the rights in the world to feel sorry for yourself, though. But of course, it is a strength to not let this define you. And I am so grateful that you are so strong in this way.
Thank you for saying that. But I do believe we all have this strength within us. I also found my own kind of first aid for grief, like we talked about before. Running, swimming in the freezing ocean, long hikes, screaming in the forest. Yes, screaming actually helps sometimes. And also just being surrounded by my boys, my dog, friends and family, and more importantly, also try to cherish my aloneness. I simply just try to manifest a happy and beautiful life, if you can say that.
Yeah, I actually believe that there is so much power in manifesting. I read that the power of manifesting good things for yourself lies in the way your thoughts shape your actions and opportunities. When you truly believe in something positive for your life, you naturally start making good choices that align with that vision. It's not magic, it's about focus, intention, and energy. When you put your mind towards growth, happiness, or success, you become more open to possibilities and more resilient in the face of setbacks. The universe might not hand you everything on a silver platter, but when you act as if good things are coming, you'll be amazed at how often they do.
Wow. Well said, sis, and so powerful, really.
Indeed, I believe in this. But first aid for grief, that is actually a great way of wording this.
It is. And of course, this is my personal toolkit, and it definitely won't suit everyone. But except for running, the ice dipping is actually one of the things that emptied my mind completely at the time. That was such a powerful feeling, like meditation, because, my head and mind were total chaos at the time.
When did you start doing this?
This all started in August 2020, the day after my husband's funeral. And it was actually my mother-in-law's idea. We all drove to the beach and ran into the ocean, family and friends. And after that, it became this ritual. A big group of friends joined in, and it was so healing. The shock of the cold, the way it forces you into the present moment. It saved me in so many ways.
I can see that as being so important, because you did it together in such an important moment, and also that you had to focus on being there in the presence and just to breathe.
It's the best form for shock therapy. It basically became a national obsession during COVID here in Norway.
Yeah, I remember that. Everyone suddenly started throwing themselves into frozen lakes and the freezing ocean, willingly.
And that's because it's so good for you. You get such an adrenaline rush. The endorphins kick in, and suddenly you feel like you can conquer anything.
Or you just feel really, really cold. Too cold to think, maybe. Coming from someone who lives in Florida and don't even really swim here.
Come on. You can't deny that it does something to your body and mind. Let me tell you, it boosts circulation, strengthens your immune system, helps with inflammation, and mentally it's incredible. It forces you to be present, to breathe through discomfort. It's almost, like I said, meditative, it is. And it's also free, and you don't need to invest in expensive equipment and such.
I hear you. And I get that. I do. But I'm still not there. And this comes back to me not being able to say no to you, because you made me join you after I came back to Norway.
You could have said no.
Of course, I could have. But instead, I forced myself for you. Do you see how nice I am?
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I hardly go for a swim in Florida, where the sun is shining and the water is warm.
And yet you survived Norway. And you did it for me.
Of course. But then I also wonder what would have happened if I said no, though. Would you have dragged me in and dunked me under?
No. The skinny, angry predator, you mean? I guess we never know.
I still have a hard time saying no to you, though, just so you know.
That's sisterhood, my dear.
I guess you're right. And you would do the same for me.
For sure. I love you, you know.
I love you too.
But now, to wrap this all up, I believe that grief includes so much, and therefore there's no perfect way to handle it. Find your own way through grief. It's hard work, but it also includes beautiful moments in between, I promise. So try to make small choices every day that moves you forward. Good choices for you. I can only give advice from my experiences and my quotes, like this one. Your wound is not your fault, but your healing is your responsibility.
You and your quotes.
Mm-hmm.
That is a good one, though. I like it.
Yeah. But I do believe that if you allow yourself to feel everything without numbing, without running away from it, that can be the most healing work you can do. Of course, ice dipping will kind of numb you, but you know what I mean. And also find what empties your mind so that you are able to take a break from it in between the battle, because you need that too.
So don't be afraid to jump into the ice cold water, metaphorically or literally, because you never know what might help you heal. And that's the power of finding what works for you. No one grieves the same way, but having an army of love around you and finding those little things that help, it makes all the difference.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be big things. Maybe just start with breathing. You know, these slow, deep breaths all the way down. It sounds too easy, I know, but just try it out.
And last but not least, remember you are stronger than you think.
Yes, we definitely are. And again, I want to say, remember we are all different and grief is personal. There is no right or wrong way to act or feel. This is my story, and I'm sharing this in the hope that it might make someone out there feel less alone, that it might put words to something you haven't been able to say out loud yet, or simply remind you that what you're feeling is valid.
Thank you for sharing, Nina.
Of course. And I think we have to dedicate this episode to my dear friends and family. You know who you are. I could never be this strong without you. You helped me heal. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.
Nina had a dream, all black and white. We were talking in English, yeah, that ain't right. Two Norwegian sisters miles apart, but that dream lit a fire, put a mic to the heart. Katrine's in the States, Nina's back home. Two voices, one mission through the microphone. Grief in life, the highs and the lows. We hit record, where the file go? Oh, we fumble, we stumble, but baby we shine. Lost the intro, never mind. Wi-Fi shaky, cables crossed, but our hearts stay strong, no moment lost. From a dream to the mic, now the world can hear. Two sisters telling truths with a laugh and a tear. We live, we learn, we sip, we sigh. Talking love, talking lost, let the echoes fly. Grief walks in, pulls up a chair, says I'll stay a while, yeah, life ain't fair. But we mix it with laughter, a toast in hand, finding light where the dark still stands. Ba-da-da-boo-doo, is this thing on? Mic's on mute, oh well, move along. Ba-ba-dee, ba-ba-da, take two. Oops, too late, let's laugh it through. From a dream to the mic, now the world can hear. Two sisters telling truths with a laugh and a tear. We live, we learn, we sip, we sigh. Talking love, talking lost, let the echoes fly. So plug in, lean in, let's take our time. No script, no filters, just rhythm and rhyme. We're here, we're now, we're in our prime. Two sisters, one dream, on the mic.